Introduction. In a world where duty outweighs desire and royal blood dictates fate, Princess Abigale was never meant to have a choice. Born into the ruling family of Eldoria, her destiny was sealed the moment she took her first breath. She would marry Prince Cedric, solidifying an alliance that would strengthen the throne and ensure stability for generations to come. But Abigale never asked for that life. She never wanted to be a queen bound by expectations, a pawn in a political game she had no interest in playing. So, on the eve of her engagement, she disappeared. Fleeing the palace under the cover of darkness, she shed her royal identity and became Amanda, an ordinary girl seeking freedom in an unfamiliar city. She traded silk gowns for simple dresses, gold-plated meals for cafe work, and the suffocating weight of duty for the thrill of an uncertain future. Then, she met Thomas, a kind-hearted commoner who saw her not as a princess but as a woman. In him, she found something she had never known before: choice, love, unbound by duty, a future shaped by her own hands. But freedom comes at a price. The king will not let her go so easily. Cedric will not tolerate being humiliated. And when the kingdom places a bounty on her head, Abigale realizes she will never truly be free, not unless she fights for it. But in war, choices are never simple. When the time comes to face the father who would rather see her imprisoned than let her defy tradition, Abigale must decide. Will she spare the man who once held her captive, or finally sever the ties that bind her to the throne? In a tale of love, deception, and rebellion, the Incognito princess is a story of one woman's fight to reclaim her life, and the warrior who stood by her side when the world turned against them. The crown was never meant to be hers, but the future, that she will take for herself. Chapter 1. The Secret Escape. Princess Abigale stood before the grand mirror in her chambers, staring at the reflection of the woman who had been groomed for royalty all her life. Gold-threaded robes, the weight of a crown, and the scent of jasmine perfume filled the air. A life designed by her father, the king, who had never once considered the woman beneath it all. She had always known her duty, but tonight, as the royal clock struck midnight, she had made her decision. The heavy doors creaked open behind her, and her maid Alma entered with a worried look. "Your Highness, you cannot leave. What will the king say? What will the kingdom say?" Alma's voice trembled as she approached, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "You are the future queen. You have to marry Prince Cedric. It is your fate." Abigale turned to face her, her heart aching. Alma had been with her since childhood, and her loyalty ran deep, but it was too late for fate. "I cannot, Alma," Abigale said, her voice firm despite the rush of fear that she was feeling at the moment. "I cannot marry a man I do not love. I have to live for myself. Please understand." Alma's face paled, her lips parting in disbelief. "But the king, he'll never forgive you. If you leave now, you will be cast out, exiled." Abigale shook her head. "I'd rather be exiled than lose myself to a life I didn't choose. This marriage, this life, it's not for me. I know my father will not approve, but I have to do this." The princess turned away from Alma and packed the few belongings she could carry in a small satchel. Her favorite books, a few dresses, a small locket of her mother, and a handful of coins. She had enough to start anew, somewhere far from the kingdom, somewhere no one knew her. "I'll leave in the morning before the palace wakes. Please tell no one. I need to be free, even if just for a little while." With her eyes filled with sorrow, Alma hesitated. Then, with a sigh, she nodded. "I will say nothing." "May you find what you are searching for, princess." The sound of the heavy wooden door closing behind her marked the end of one life and the beginning of another. Abigale walked down the winding corridors of the castle, past the guards who were oblivious to her departure. Her heart pounded in her chest, but there was no turning back. Chapter 2. The Prince's Search. The halls of the royal palace echoed with tension. King Alden, his face tight with anger, stormed into the grand council room. His eyes, dark with frustration, scanned the men standing in wait for his orders. "How much longer must we search?" the king demanded, his voice like thunder. One of his most trusted advisers, Lord Harrington, bowed slightly, his tone calm but respectful. "Your Majesty, we have sent word across the kingdom, and every village, town, and city has been scoured. Yet, there is no trace of Princess Abigale." "Impossible!" King Alden bellowed. "She cannot vanish without a trace. Find her, or I will have heads." His hand slammed down on the table, rattling the room's fine china. Prince Cedric, standing to the side with a clenched jaw, stepped forward. His presence was imposing, yet his eyes held a quiet sadness that few noticed. He too had searched tirelessly for Abigale, though his reasons were far more personal. He was supposed to be her future husband, and though their union was one arranged by duty, Cedric had grown to care for her more than he was willing to admit. "Father, please, let me search one more time," Cedric said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'll go to the city myself. Perhaps there are places we have missed." The king's gaze softened for a brief moment. He too felt the sting of her disappearance, but it was the weight of the kingdom's future that troubled him most. The alliance with Cedric's kingdom hinged on Abigale's marriage. Without her, that bond would be shattered, leaving them vulnerable to rivals. "Do what you must, Cedric," the king muttered, waving his hand in dismissal. "But bring her back. We cannot afford failure." Chapter 3. A Love in the Shadows. A few months had passed and Abigale was getting used to life outside the castle walls. She even spotted a young man named Thomas that caught her attention. The first time Abigale saw Thomas, he was standing outside a small bookshop, deep in thought, flipping through the pages of an old, worn novel. She had only been in that city for a week, but in that moment, she felt like time had stopped. She had come here to disappear, to blend into the world of commoners and leave her royal past behind. Yet, as she watched him from across the street, something inside her stirred. He looked nothing like the polished, arrogant nobleman she had grown up around. His clothes were simple, his hands calloused from hard work, and his presence was warm, not commanding. When she finally walked into the cafe where she had started working, she realized he was already there, sitting at his usual table by the window. "You're new here," he said, looking up as she placed his coffee on the table. His voice was smooth but unpretentious, and his brown eyes held a curiosity she wasn't used to. Abigale hesitated before nodding. "I just moved here. Needed a fresh start." He smiled. "Welcome to the city, then. I'm Thomas." She forced herself to return the smile. "Amanda," she lied. She had never lied so easily before, but with him, it felt necessary. What started as casual exchanges soon became longer conversations. Thomas would come to the cafe every morning before work, ordering the same thing, black coffee, no sugar, and they would talk about books, life in the city, and little things that made them laugh. Abigale found herself drawn to him, not just because he was kind, but because he was different. He didn't know who she was. He treated her like a normal person, not a princess. These were new feelings for Abigale, and she liked it. One evening, he invited her to walk through the city with him. "This is my favourite place," Thomas said, leading her to a quiet park overlooking the river. The sky was a deep shade of purple, the stars beginning to emerge, casting their soft glow over the water. Abigale breathed in the crisp air, feeling lighter than she had in years. "It's beautiful." Thomas turned to look at her. "You ever feel like you don't belong anywhere?" She hesitated. If only he knew how true that was for her. All the time, she admitted. His eyes searched hers for a moment before he smiled. Guess we have that in common then. They sat together watching the river flow, and for the first time in a long while, Abigale allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was where she was meant to be. From the shadows of an alley, a pair of watchful eyes followed their every move. Prince Cedric had been searching for Abigale since the day she disappeared. He had sent spies into every town, and now, finally, he had found her. He watched from a distance, his jaw tightening as he saw her laugh with Thomas, saw the way she looked at him, not with duty but with something he had never seen in her before. Affection. "She doesn't belong here," Cedric muttered, gripping the hilt of his sword. "She belongs with me." His spy, a cloaked man who had been trailing Abigale for days, stepped closer. "Do we take her now, my lord?" Cedric narrowed his eyes, shaking his head. "Not yet," he murmured. "Let her enjoy this little fantasy. When the time is right, I will take her back myself, and she will have no choice but to return." As Abigale and Thomas sat by the river, completely unaware, the prince turned and disappeared into the night. He would let her believe she was free. For now. Chapter 4. Falling in Love. Days turned into weeks, and what began as friendly conversations over morning coffee turned into something deeper. Thomas had a way of making Abigale forget who she was supposed to be. He wasn't trying to impress her, nor did he treat her like she was delicate or untouchable. He made her laugh with his dry humour, listened when she spoke, and never pushed her for answers she wasn't ready to give. But most of all, he made her feel real. One evening, after a long day at the cafe, he waited outside for her. The street was busy with merchants closing their stalls and children running past, their laughter echoing through the city. "You look exhausted," he said as she pulled her shawl tighter around herself. She sighed, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I forgot how tiring it is to actually work for a living." Thomas smirked. "Harder than sitting on a throne all day?" Her heart stopped for a second, panic flashing through her. Did he know? Had he figured it out? Then she realized he was joking. She forced a chuckle. "Much harder. Maybe I should find a rich husband to take care of me." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned?" "Maybe," she teased, bumping his shoulder lightly as they walked. But in truth, she knew she could never leave him. She had met dozens of princes, men who spoke in rehearsed compliments and thought love was something they could possess. Thomas was different. He wasn't trying to claim her. He was simply enjoying her company, and for the first time in her life, she was free to enjoy his. A week later, Thomas took her to the rooftop of an old clock tower. "It's a little dangerous," he admitted as they climbed the rickety wooden stairs, "but I promise the view is worth it." Abigale's breath caught when they reached the top. The entire city stretched out before them, bathed in golden light as the sun dipped below the horizon. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of fresh bread from the marketplace below. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Thomas leaned against the railing, watching her instead of the sunset. "Yeah, it is." She turned to find him closer than she expected. Something had shifted between them. "Amanda." His voice was quiet, hesitant. She knew what was coming, and she wanted it. Before he could second-guess himself, she closed the distance, pressing her lips softly to his. The world faded. There was no kingdom, no duty, no arranged marriage waiting for her in the shadows. Just him. Just this moment. When they finally pulled apart, Thomas let out a breathless chuckle. "I was planning to be smooth about it, but—" "You think too much," she murmured, smiling. "Maybe," he admitted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But you make it hard to think straight." She laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't forced. From a shadowed alley below, Prince Cedric watched them. His hands were clenched into fists, rage boiling under his skin. She was supposed to be his. This commoner, this nobody, had stolen what rightfully belonged to him. His spy stepped beside him. "What do we do, my lord?" Cedric's jaw tightened. "We wait." His eyes never left them, watching as Thomas touched her like she wasn't born to be a queen, like she was just an ordinary girl. "They can play pretend for now," Cedric muttered, "but soon she'll remember who she belongs to." And when that day came, Thomas would pay for taking what was his. Chapter 5. The Language of Love. After their first kiss, something between them shifted. They spent more time together, their conversations lasting late into the night. Abigale found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, her love for books, her favourite childhood memories, the way she had always felt trapped in her old life. Thomas never pried, never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. Instead, he listened, watching her with that quiet intensity that made her feel like the only person in the world. One evening, as they sat on the rooftop of the clock tower again, Thomas pulled out a book. "You're always talking about how much you love stories," he said, flipping through the pages. "I figured I'd read one with you." Abigale smiled, pulling her shawl tighter against the cool breeze. "You don't strike me as a bookworm." "I'm not," Thomas admitted, leaning back on his elbows. "But I like listening to you talk about them." So she read to him. The flickering lantern light cast golden hues across his face as he listened, eyes half closed, as if memorizing her voice. And somewhere in the middle of the story, she realized she was falling for him completely. The city market was always alive with color and energy, merchants shouting, music playing, the smell of fresh bread and roasted nuts filling the air. Thomas had insisted on taking Abigale there one morning. "You can tell a lot about a person by how they bargain," he told her as they wandered between stalls. "Then what does it say about me?" she asked, crossing her arms. "You're terrible at it," he said with a grin. "But I admire your confidence." She scoffed. "I'll have you know, I am perfectly capable of—" Before she could finish, Thomas wrapped an arm around her waist and spun her behind a fruit stand, pressing a finger to his lips. Abigale's heart slammed against her ribs. "What?" "Guards," he whispered. She stiffened. Sure enough, 2 royal soldiers were patrolling nearby, her father's men. Panic clawed up her throat, but Thomas held her close, shielding her from view. "Stay still," he murmured. His breath was warm against her ear, his hand steady against her back. If she weren't so terrified of being caught, she might have noticed how good it felt to be held by him. After a few tense moments, the guards moved on. Thomas finally released her, though his hand lingered on hers for a moment too long. "You okay?" he asked. Abigale exhaled shakily. "I will be." Thomas studied her, his gaze softening. "You sure you're just some girl looking for a fresh start?" Her breath caught. But before she could answer, a vendor called out to them, snapping the moment in half. Thomas let it go, but she knew the question lingered. And so did his touch. The storm hit without warning. Abigale and Thomas had spent the afternoon near the river, but as the sky darkened, rain began to pour in heavy sheets. "Come on!" Thomas grabbed her hand, pulling her through the empty streets, laughter bubbling up between them. By the time they reached a covered alleyway, they were soaked. Abigale's hair clung to her skin, her dress heavy with water. Thomas ran a hand through his drenched curls, chuckling. "Well, that wasn't part of the plan." Abigale laughed, breathless. "You had a plan?" "Not really," he admitted. Then his grin turned mischievous. "But since we're here—" He held out his hand. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Dancing," he said simply. She rolled her eyes. "There's no music," Thomas shrugged. "Then we make our own." Abigale hesitated. In the palace, dancing had always been a performance, a show of grace and etiquette. But here, with him, it was something else entirely. Something real. She placed her hand in his and he pulled her close, swaying gently in the rain. There was no rhythm, no formal steps, just them, moving together in a way that felt effortless. For a moment, the world disappeared. And when Thomas whispered, "I think I'm falling for you," she realized she was already his. From the rooftop of a nearby building, Prince Cedric watched them with a cold, calculating stare. He had waited long enough. Seeing Abigale in Thomas's arms, laughing, kissing him in the rain, it was more than he could tolerate. "Prepare the men," he told his spy, his voice like steel. "It's time to remind my bride exactly where she belongs." The hunt was over. Chapter 6. The Commoner's Secret. In the bustling streets of the city, Abigale's new life was far from ordinary. Her days were spent working at the cafe, learning how to blend in, to laugh, to live as any common girl would. But despite her efforts to bury the weight of her royal past, a small part of her still yearned for it, the grandeur, the duty, the certainty of it all. Here, she was a stranger to herself. Her relationship with Thomas, whose gentle nature had slowly woven its way into her heart, flourished. They talked about everything and nothing, his dreams of becoming an architect, her love for literature, their mutual fascination with the small wonders of everyday life. She could almost forget that she had been born to rule a kingdom. One evening, as Abigale closed the cafe, Thomas walked her home. The air was cool and the streets were quieter than usual, bathed in the soft glow of the lamplights. "Amanda, can I ask you something?" His voice was tentative, as if he had been weighing his words. "Of course," she replied, though a knot tightened in her chest. He hesitated, then spoke again, his voice lower. "I feel like there's something you're not telling me. Something important. You're not like the others here. You've been distant, and sometimes I feel like you're hiding from something." He paused, searching her face for signs of the truth. "I don't know what it is, but I want you to know that whatever it is, it doesn't change how I feel about you." Her heart skipped a beat. He was so close to the truth, but how could she possibly tell him? She had been so careful, so determined to keep her past buried. She had feared that if he knew who she truly was, he would run, repelled by the truth of her royalty, of her arranged marriage. He would never see her as just Amanda again. "I'm just a little complicated," she said, forcing a smile. "But I promise you I'm not hiding anything dangerous." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't press her further. "If you say so," he said, though his eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary. There was a hint of doubt there, but it didn't seem to change how he felt about her. Abigale let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. For now the lie held. Chapter 7. The Prince's Arrival. As Abigale walked back to her small apartment later that week, she felt a strange unease in the pit of her stomach. Her life in the city had been far from ordinary, but there was something on the horizon, something she couldn't quite see but could feel in her bones. The weight of her royal past had never quite left her, and now it seemed like it was coming for her. The knock on the door was gentle but firm, as if it had been waiting for the right moment. Abigale froze in place, her pulse quickening. She had been avoiding this day, the day when everything would unravel. When she opened the door, standing in the dim light of the hallway was Prince Cedric. His presence, regal and imposing, made her heart stutter. He was dressed in fine clothing, his eyes filled with a mix of frustration and determination. "I knew I'd find you here," he said quietly, his gaze locking with hers. "I've searched everywhere, Abigale. You can't keep running from your responsibilities. You belong back at the palace." Abigale's breath caught in her throat. This was not how she imagined this moment. She had hoped she would have more time. "How did you find me?" she whispered, trying to steady her breath. Cedric's lips tightened. It wasn't hard. Your father's men were searching for you, but I had my own ways of tracking you down. You can't hide forever, Abigale. Abigale stumbled back, her mind racing. I'm not Abigale anymore. I'm Amanda. Just a normal woman with no past, no title. Please, leave me in peace. But Cedric's eyes didn't soften. You can lie to yourself all you want, but you can't lie to me. Your father will never forgive you. And if you don't return with me now, there will be consequences. Abigale's chest tightened. Consequences? You've already made your choice, haven't you? You've chosen him over your kingdom. Cedric's voice was sharp. Abigale felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. Her mind flashed to Thomas, her heart torn between the love she had found and the life she had been forced to leave behind. Thomas, she whispered. Cedric's voice grew colder. Yes, the commoner. I don't know if you think you can have a life with him, but it's not going to happen. He doesn't belong in your world. Abigale stepped back, her mind racing. What are you saying? I'm saying that the future of your kingdom is at stake, Abigale. The king will never allow you to marry a man who is beneath your station. You must come back to the palace with me. It's the only way to secure your place in the world you were born into. Abigale shook her head, her thoughts spiraling. I can't be that woman anymore. Cedric's expression softened for a brief moment, but you have no choice. Chapter 8. The Choice. The next day, Abigale found herself standing at a crossroads. Thomas was waiting for her, just as he always did. He smiled when she arrived, but there was something different in his eyes, something she couldn't quite name. Amanda, he said softly, you seem different today. Are you all right? Abigale hesitated, her thoughts swirling. She wanted to tell him the truth, to tell him everything. But how could she? She had already created a life here, one built on a lie. Could she shatter that now? Could she risk losing everything? Amanda? Thomas' voice broke through her thoughts, and she met his gaze. I have to tell you something, she said, her voice trembling. He nodded, his expression filled with concern. You can tell me anything. Abigale swallowed hard. I'm not who you think I am. The words felt foreign, like a confession she had been hiding for too long. She took a deep breath before continuing. I am not just some girl from the countryside. I'm a princess. My real name is Abigale. For a long moment, Thomas didn't say anything. His brow furrowed, as if processing the revelation. You're a princess? His voice was barely a whisper. But you've been living like this. You've been living like me. Abigale nodded. I never wanted this life. I wanted freedom. I wanted to live on my own terms, not in the shadow of the crown. But now everything has changed. Changed? Thomas asked, his voice tight. What do you mean? The prince is here. He found me, she said, her eyes wet with emotion. And my father wants me to return to the palace. I'm being forced to marry someone I don't love. I'm being forced to abandon everything I've built here with you. Abigale. Thomas whispered her name, his hand reaching for hers. You don't have to go back. You don't have to choose that life. Her heart clenched at his words, but she knew the reality. Her future had already been decided long before she could dream of a life with him. The king would never allow it. But if I don't go back, my father will exile me. He will make sure I can never return. Thomas' grip on her hand tightened. Then I'll come with you. I'll leave everything behind, too. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. You can't. I'm asking too much of you. You deserve better than this. No, Thomas said firmly. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to live your life on your terms. Chapter 9. The King's Ultimatum. Days later, Abigale found herself back at the palace, standing before the king in the grand throne room. The heavy silence in the room pressed down on her as the king's gaze bore into her. His disappointment was palpable, but it was the anger that terrified her the most. "You have returned, but not as you should have," the king said coldly. "You have defied your duty, Abigale. You have chosen a commoner over your family, over your kingdom, and now there will be consequences." Abigale's heart dropped as she heard the truth in his words. There was no room for defiance in her family, no room for love outside the royal boundaries. "I can't marry him," Abigale said, her voice shaking but strong. "I will never marry Prince Cedric. I would rather be exiled than spend my life with him." The king's face hardened. "Then exile it shall be." As Abigale prepared to leave the palace for good, she realized that the time had come to make her choice. Thomas was waiting for her outside as promised. She had made her decision. "Where will we go?" he asked, his eyes filled with hope. Abigale smiled softly. "We'll go anywhere, as long as we're together." The decision was made. She had chosen love over duty, freedom over obligation, and though the road ahead would not be easy, she knew she was finally free to live the life she had always wanted. They left the palace behind, walking into an uncertain future, but one filled with possibility, together. Chapter 10. A Fragile Freedom. Abigale had spent her entire life behind palace walls, surrounded by silk and gold. Now she walked through the dirt roads of an unfamiliar town, with nothing but a small satchel of belongings and Thomas by her side. The weight of her choice was beginning to settle on her. She had left behind everything she had ever known, the royal halls, the people who once bowed in her presence, and even the certainty of a future she never wanted. In its place was a new life, unpredictable and unknown. They had travelled for days, avoiding major cities where news of her exile could have spread. Thomas had managed to secure a small cottage in a quiet village by the sea where no one knew who she was. It was nothing like the palace, no velvet curtains, no silverware engraved with the royal crest. The walls were simple wood, the furniture handmade, but, for the first time, it was theirs. "You okay?" Thomas asked, watching her carefully as she sat on the bed, running her fingers over the worn fabric of the blanket. Abigale looked up and forced a smile. "I will be. It's just strange, not knowing what comes next." Thomas sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "We'll figure it out together. You're free now, Abigale. No one can tell you how to live your life anymore." She squeezed his hand, grateful for his unwavering support, but deep down, she knew their troubles weren't over. For weeks, Abigale and Thomas lived peacefully, blending into the quiet village life. Thomas found work repairing boats at the docks, and Abigale helped a kind elderly woman, Madame Lisette, run a small bakery in town. The days were simple, filled with laughter and stolen moments of happiness. But peace never lasted long. One afternoon, as Abigale was arranging fresh loaves of bread in the shop window, a pair of travellers entered the bakery. She barely glanced at them, until she overheard their conversation. "Did you hear about the princess?" one of them muttered to the other. Abigale's hands stilled. "The one who ran off with a commoner? Of course. The king has placed a bounty on her return. Anyone who spots her is to report to the royal guards immediately." A chill ran down her spine. The traveller scoffed. "Imagine giving up the throne for some peasant. The king must be furious." "Furious enough to send men after her," the other whispered. "They say Prince Cedric isn't done with her yet either. He still wants to claim his bride whether she likes it or not." Abigale's stomach twisted in fear. She knew exile wouldn't be the end of it. Her father would never let her go so easily. And Cedric. He had always been persistent. If he was still determined to have her, they weren't safe. She left the bakery early, hurrying home to tell Thomas. "We have to leave," Abigale said the moment she stepped into their cottage, her voice shaking. Thomas frowned, setting down the fishing net he had been mending. "What's wrong?" "They're looking for me. There's a bounty. If anyone recognizes me, they'll turn me in." Thomas's jaw clenched. "Damn it. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but I thought we'd have more time." Abigale paced the small room, her mind racing. "We need a plan. We can't stay here." Thomas stood and gently caught her by the shoulders. "We'll leave at sunrise, but we need to be smart about this. If we keep running, we'll never be free." She swallowed hard. "Then what do we do?" Thomas's expression was grim. "We stop running. We fight back." Chapter 11. The First Betrayal. They didn't wait until sunrise. Under the cover of darkness, Abigale and Thomas packed what little they had and slipped out of the village, moving quickly along the rocky coastline. The ocean stretched endlessly beside them, its waves crashing against the cliffs. A reminder of how small they were compared to the forces hunting them. "We need to head inland," Thomas murmured. "The coastline is too exposed. If any of the royal guards come through the village, they'll spot us instantly." Abigale nodded, pulling her hood lower over her face. They had barely spoken since leaving, but fear tightened around them like a noose. They walked for hours, avoiding main roads and sticking to the forest trails. It wasn't until the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon that they stopped to rest in an abandoned mill. Thomas was gathering firewood when Abigale noticed something: the sound of hooves in the distance. Her blood ran cold. She ran outside just as Thomas sprinted toward her. "Someone's coming," he said, breathless. They hid behind a pile of broken barrels as 4 riders approached, their armor catching the morning light. They weren't just any guards. They were Cedric's men. "Search the village. She's here somewhere," one of them barked. Abigale's pulse pounded in her ears. Then a familiar voice made her stomach drop. "We should check the old mill," said Madame Lisette. Abigale's heart shattered. The woman she had trusted, who had shown her kindness, had betrayed her. Thomas grabbed her hand. "We need to move. Now." They ran. Through the dense trees, down muddy slopes, dodging twisted roots and fallen branches. Behind them, the guards were closing in, their voices shouting orders. "Faster!" Thomas urged, pulling her along. Abigale's lungs burned, her legs screaming for rest, but she refused to stop. If they were caught, she knew what awaited her: a cage, a forced marriage, or worse, execution. A crossbow bolt whizzed past her head, striking a tree. "Stop running, princess!" one of the guards snarled. Abigale grabbed a fallen branch and turned, swinging it into the legs of the nearest guard. He collapsed with a grunt, and Thomas tackled another, knocking his helmet off before landing a punch to his jaw. But they were outnumbered. One of the remaining guards lunged at Abigale, grabbing her wrist. "Let go of me!" she screamed, twisting against his grip. Thomas slammed a rock against the guard's temple, sending him sprawling. "Move!" he shouted, pulling her forward. They had one chance to disappear before the rest of the guards regrouped. Abigale made a choice she never thought she would. She never knew she had it in her. She looked to the ground and grabbed a fallen sword from one of the unconscious guards and ran after Thomas. She wasn't just running for survival anymore. She was preparing to fight. Chapter 12. A Price on Their Heads. By nightfall, Abigale and Thomas had escaped deeper into the wilderness, but they weren't safe yet. "The king will double the bounty after this," Thomas said grimly as they sat near a small fire in a cave. Abigale gripped the sword she had taken. "Then we make sure no one can claim it." Thomas raised a brow. "You want to fight?" Abigale met his gaze with steel in her eyes. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life running, Thomas. If my father wants me back so badly, then we make him regret sending his men after us." Thomas smirked, shaking his head. "I fell in love with a runaway princess. Turns out I'm traveling with a warrior." But Abigale wasn't smiling. They had crossed a line today. Attacking royal guards meant they were now criminals. And criminals had only two choices: keep running or start a war. The morning after their escape, Abigale and Thomas moved deeper into the forest, their bodies sore from the chase. They had spent the night in a cave, their only warmth coming from a small fire and each other. "Where do we go from here?" Abigale asked, wrapping her cloak tightly around herself. Thomas stared into the flames, his jaw clenched. "We can't keep running. We need allies." Abigale frowned. "Who would fight against the king?" Thomas glanced at her. "More people than you think. Not everyone in your kingdom agrees with his rule." It was then that they heard the rustling of leaves, not the sound of an animal, but of people moving in the shadows. "Drop your weapons," a voice commanded from the darkness. Abigale and Thomas slowly turned to see a group of armed warriors stepping into the firelight. Their clothes were tattered, their armor mismatched, but there was a fierce determination in their eyes. A woman, tall and battle-worn, stepped forward. "You're the runaway princess," she said, narrowing her gaze at Abigale, "and the man who's been foolish enough to stand beside her." Abigale raised her chin. "Who are you?" The woman smirked. "We're the Shadowlands Rebellion, and we've been waiting for an opportunity to strike." Thomas had always seemed strong, but Abigale had never truly seen him fight, until now. After being brought to the rebels' hidden camp, Thomas was challenged to prove himself. The leader, General Kyle, was a grizzled veteran who had once served in the royal army before defecting. He had seen too many innocent people suffer under the king's rule. "You say you want to fight," Kyle said, tossing Thomas a sword. "Show me." Thomas rolled his shoulders and took a stance that spoke of years of training. Abigale watched in shock as he parried Kale's attacks with precision, dodging, countering, striking back with force that nearly unbalanced the hardened soldier. Kyle finally stepped back, breathing heavily. A slow grin spread across his face. "You didn't tell us your man was a warrior, Princess." Abigale turned to Thomas, wide-eyed. "You never told me you could fight like that." Thomas wiped sweat from his brow. "You never asked." The rebels welcomed them after that. Thomas was given a command position, and Abigale, a warrior now, not just a fleeing princess, trained alongside the fighters. They needed to be ready if they were going to take the fight to the king and Cedric. Chapter 13. Storming the Palace. Weeks passed. The rebellion grew. News of Abigale's defiance spread through the kingdom. Villages rose in protest, soldiers defected, and the king's power weakened. Then the day came. The rebels launched their attack on the palace, striking under the cover of night. Explosions rocked the outer walls, arrows rained down, and the gates fell open. Abigale and Thomas fought side by side, cutting through the royal guards as they made their way toward the throne room. Abigale's heart pounded as she stepped into the grand hall where her father, the king, stood waiting, flanked by Prince Cedric and the last of his men. "You've gone too far, daughter," the king said, gripping his sword. "I should have stopped you long ago." Cedric sneered. "You were mine, Abigale, and now look at you choosing a peasant over your kingdom." Thomas stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Say that again." Cedric drew his sword, lunging at Thomas. The two men clashed, their blades sparking in the candlelight. Cedric was skilled, but Thomas fought like a man with nothing to lose. Abigale joined the fight, cutting down the guards who tried to protect the king. She was no longer a helpless princess. She was a warrior now. With one final move, Thomas disarmed Cedric, knocking him to his knees. "You lose," Thomas said, holding his sword at Cedric's throat. Cedric's face twisted in rage. "Kill me then. You're nothing but a low-born coward." But Thomas didn't strike. Instead, he looked at Abigale. "It's your choice." Abigale stared at Cedric, the man who had chased her, hunted her, tried to claim her like a possession. But she wouldn't stoop to his level. "Let him live," she said coldly. "He's already lost everything." Cedric's face darkened with shame. Then she turned to her father. The king stood alone now, his guards defeated, his rule crumbling. Abigale expected him to rage, to fight, to command what little power he had left. Instead, he sighed. "You remind me of your mother," he said, his voice weary. She too refused to be controlled. Abigale's grip on her sword tightened. "Are you going to order my execution now, father?" The king's shoulders slumped. "I see now that I have already lost you." Thomas stepped beside her, his stance protective. The king's gaze flickered to him. "And you. I should have known you were more than you seemed." Thomas didn't reply. He didn't need to. The king took a deep breath. "Leave this place. Take what remains of your rebellion and go. I will not send my men after you again." Abigale narrowed her eyes. "Just like that?" He nodded. "I was never meant to rule forever. Perhaps it's time for the kingdom to change." She studied him, searching for a lie, but found none. Abigale lowered her sword. The war was over. The rebellion disbanded. The kingdom did not fall. Instead, it transformed. Without Abigale to take the throne, a new ruling council was formed, one chosen by the people. Prince Cedric vanished, his pride too wounded to remain. And Abigale and Thomas? They disappeared from the kingdom, free at last. They travelled, finding a home where no one cared about royal blood or rebellion. A place where they could simply live. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the hills, Thomas took her hand. "We did it," he said. Abigale smiled. "Yes, we did. No crowns, no kingdoms, no more running, just them together." Hope that you enjoyed The Incognito Princess, a romantic suspense novel.